So tonight we have Iras Srole, who's here in Rochester, and Ira spent many years going back, starting from the mid 70s, as the chief photographer for the city of Rochester. And he just retired about 2 years ago, a couple years ago. And he's an avid postcard collector and also interested in local history. Tonight he's going to talk about a collection he has of postcards of people in the workplace. So Ira, you can go ahead now and share your screen.
Thanks, Michael. I'll do a brief introduction before I start showing the images. Yes, I have been a deltiologist for 37 years. I just figured that out on my little hand calculator here, which represents a significant portion of my life. I became interested in postcard collecting in 1984, which was the occasion of the sesquicentennial of Rochester, which is the 150th anniversary. There is another word. There is a word for the 175th anniversary, which Rochester had in 2009, but nobody knows what that word is. And even if they did, they couldn't pronounce it. But sesquicentennial is relatively easy. And at that time, everybody was interested in the history of Rochester. So naturally, I was the city photographer at that time. I had been for only 5 years at that time. And I started getting interested in Rochester history and, by extension, Rochester postcards and postcards from all over. I became a collector in the old-fashioned way, in which you go into antique stores and pay cash. Remember that? Neither do I. So then I became, I did a little bit of studying on postcards, and I realized that my favorite period of postcard collecting, it was the famed undivided back section of postcard history, which is lasted from 1901 to 1907. Before that was the private mailing cards, and Richard shared with me before we started that he recently picked up something from the pioneer era of which lasted from 1870 to 1898. That's truly ancient history as far as postcard collecting is concerned. After that, we had the private mailing cards for a short period around the turn of the 20th century, and then we had the undivided back section, and then the divided back, white border, linen. These are all different styles. You postcard nerds know what I'm talking about, but those of you who are not, these are just different styles of printing postcards. And there were some of a linen variety from 1930 to 1945, and then from 1939 to the present day is what they call Photochrome. If you were to go in and buy a postcard now, a modern postcard, it would be a Photochrome. So I have a rather vast collection, well into the thousands. I'm sure some of you probably have, into the tens and hundreds of thousands. I won't ask you who you are and embarrass you. But yeah, I have a very large collection, and it turns out that my favorite category of postcard subjects are the work scenes or occupational scenes, where people are actually in their place of employment, whether it's a farm or on a military base or in a factory, harvesting cotton. These are people, I have to believe, as a photographer, I have to believe that these were pictures they taken in black and white of people in their workplaces. Obviously, they would have had to have gotten permission to do this. And in one series of images that I'm going to show you shortly, there are about a half a dozen postcard images taken in the different locations of the same factory, which I found interesting. I've never seen that before. The factory is not identified, but the location is Fall River, Massachusetts. Anyway, I'm always interested in what people do for a living. What's their vocation? How do they, how do they earn a living? What do they do? And I have my own collection of photographs that I have done in work locations, and as well the postcards. They're from all over the world. I do have a large local collection, but I enjoy cards from Asia, Africa, Latin America. I don't have that many of them, actually. Europe, mostly from the States, mostly from New York. As you get closer to your point of departure, the local stuff tends to be more numerous. And then as you get further and further from home, it becomes less and less. But it also becomes, because it's less and less, it's become somehow maybe more precious as a result. This is my first image. It is of, and I'm going to give my French a whirl here. It's called DecaV aeroplane. Now, this guy, DecaV, was a rather unsuccessful inventor. He tried his best to make this machine fly. He was unsuccessful. And you can probably understand why, because those wings don't look like they're going to hold anything up in the air. And sure enough, they didn't. So he's considered one of the lesser inventors of the early 20th century. He likened this machine to a big Ferris wheel that he saw at the Paris Universal Exhibition in 1900. There is no record of this machine ever having flown. So, but it does make an interesting postcard. This next one is of U.S. sailors during wash day. This vehicle, as opposed to the last one we saw, was as successful at doing what it was meant to do, which was being some kind of a Navy ship. We don't know what it was, whether it was a destroyer or something else, it doesn't say. The postcard is a undivided back, and we can just see these sailors washing their stuff right on the deck of the ship. This particular card was not mailed, printed in Germany. Here's one from Kansas, making hay. A couple of young women, this may be mother and daughter, actually making hay in Graydon, Kansas. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This has a nice silver border. This was mailed from one location in Kansas to another. It looks like it's mailed to Studley, Kansas, in 1911. I like this card because they're just obviously posing, but they're having a great time. And they're probably working on, I'm guessing they're probably working on their own farm and having a real nice time. These fellows are a little more serious about life. This is a giant fir tree. The card was not mailed. It is divided back. And it was printed in California. So I'm led to believe that this is some forest, probably printed in San Francisco. So I'm led to believe that this is a forest in Northern California. And these guys are in the process of taking down this giant fir tree. They're obviously posing. They're taking a break. They're dressed rather nicely for what you would think a couple of lumberjacks would be. This one guy over here is wearing what looks like almost like a sport coat. They're wearing hats. This guy's got a long sleeve shirt, and maybe that's a tie. So you know they're dressed rather nicely for the job they're doing, and they're obviously taking their work quite seriously. This is what is called a typical, TIPICAL, Cuban plow.
Typical.
Typical, I imagine that may be a Spanish spelling. I don't know. It's from the República de Cuba. Unmailed, divided back. And then when they refer to the plow, I don't know whether they're literally referring to the tool that is breaking the ground, or whether this whole setup is considered the plow. A couple of oxen, and a fellow who's got a hat on and looks like he's smoking a cigarette. So it's probably not working that hard. It looks like it's the oxen who are doing the bulk of the work. Another card that shows beasts of burden. This one's from Mexico. My Spanish is not good, but it's burros cargados de paja, which I understand means donkeys laden with straw. And on a hot day, I wouldn't want to be one of those donkeys, or any day for that matter. But they are, looks like they are certainly laden with a lot of straw. This is an undivided back card from Mexico, sent to the US. Can't wait. Looks like it's sent to West Virginia from Mexico. And it has Spanish and French on the back. No English in terms of what is actually printed on the card. These are Pueblo Indians selling pottery. Copyright 1902 by the Detroit Photographic Company. The location is not mentioned on the card. It's an undivided back, unposted card. So it's in really nice condition. And there is no location given anywhere on the card. I would have to believe, if I had to guess, that it was perhaps New Mexico, Arizona, but it is not stated. And it looks like these women are selling pottery. There is a baby on the back of one of the women, and they are obviously posing for this picture. I don't know whether these people who would be posing, if they ever got compensated for their troubles. I don't know. Dick is shaking his head no. He doesn't think so. I would be inclined to agree. I don't know what kind of, I would call many of these are what I would call environmental portraits, which means that they are portraits in a particular environment. Now, how did this agreement between the subject and the photographer come about? I have no idea. But chances are they were not paid. Maybe they were given photos, maybe not. What do you think, Dick? Give me a yes or a no. No. Dick is saying no. Nothing. They didn't get nothing. All right. And he's probably...
I have a question.
Question? Yeah.
Yes. Given the camera equipment at the time, would it have been likely that part of the posing was designed then to accommodate the camera equipment and the inability or the limited ability of cameras to be able to photograph movement without blurring?
Absolutely. In 1902, if that's what this is, copyright 1902. Chances are this was made with a 4x5-inch view camera with 4x5 black and white film that was then colorized in the printing process. So yes, this would have been more than likely a large view camera on a tripod with pictures taken one at a time. And it's by our standards, this was a very slow, cumbersome process, but it's what it was in the day. That's if you wanted to take pictures, that's what you had to do. So yeah, they were probably just asked to stand in this particular very nondescript location and face the camera and stay still, and they took the picture. Whether they were compensated for it in any way, I don't know. I've never looked into it, quite honestly, but I'm guessing that probably not. It was probably thank you, or maybe they'll buy a piece of pottery and send them on their way. But I'm guessing. A Navajo Indian silversmith plying his trade. See other side for description. Now here is when I went down a little rabbit hole. It refers to Navajo on the printed on the back. This is an unposted divided back card, white border card, unposted, undated. It does say that it was printed, or the company that published it was in Gallup, New Mexico. So we have to assume that this scene was somewhere nearby. So sure enough, it says printed on the back here that this silversmith, a Navajo Indian silversmith, was working in his house in Coolidge, no state given, Coolidge, but that has got to be New Mexico. So I looked up Coolidge, New Mexico, and it is now considered a ghost town. There is a website called ghosttowns.com, and they give a little blurb saying that there are two towns by the name of Coolidge, the present day town and the one that no longer exists. The ruins of the latter Coolidge were bulldozed about 1930, but the site is marked by a large log hogan that was constructed by the federal government. The original Coolidge was first named Crane after a Billy Crane who at one time acted as a scout for Kit Carson. Then I looked up roadsidethoughts.com, and about Coolidge, it says, so far we have found very little information about Coolidge. The little that we found leads us to believe that the community is historic. Now, I think that's rather charming. They are assuming that a town of which they know next to nothing is historic. So that's good. That's nice. They are not making any definite assertions about it, but they're saying it's probably historic. So anyway, that was a little rabbit hole that I went down as far as Coolidge, New Mexico was concerned. Leaving the Americas for now, Maltese Lacework. Malta, I recently discovered, is an island, 3 islands actually, in the Mediterranean south of Sicily. So it's in the South Mediterranean, sort of between Sicily and Tunisia. And this woman is a lace worker. Her cat is there with her. And this is an undivided back card, unposted. And that's really about it. I think it's quite a lovely image of this woman working on lace. Another crafts person, a man making a hooked rug in Western North Carolina. This is a linen card. It has been posted, 1 cent stamp. By the way, when the US government changed the postal rate on postcard from 2 cents to 1 cent, and I believe that was in 1898, or right around then, that blew open the whole postcard sending industry. That 1 penny, and that was in the days when a penny was worth something. When the tariff went down from 2 cents to 1 cent, it was like people said, yes, I'm going to do this. And people just started sending postcards like crazy. Billions, literally billions of postcards were sent. Because it was a half price. You could not do it. Anyway, this is a hook rug maker near Asheville, North Carolina. They pursue their native handicrafts, and the products of their looms, forges, potter wheels, and wood carving tools are much in demand among tourists and connoisseurs of native craft work. This is a card from Ireland. It's titled Connemara Colleen, Bringing Home the Turf. That would be turf in her basket. I am not really sure what the Irish did with turf. Does anybody know?
Used it for
Yes.
fuel, heating fuel.
Fuel, yeah.
Heating
Yeah.
fuel. They would burn it in their fireplaces, I guess, yes?
And I think it was more than just soil. It was manure, dried
Oh.
manure.
Okay. Add some pungency to it. But here is a rather nice portrait of this young woman, Colleen, bringing home the turf. And it's rather a lovely scene. Both she and the donkey look quite relaxed. She is barefoot. And that basket looks quite lovely. So I like this card. So this is a little comedy from the military. This is a little bit out of the order that I had these in, but here is this young soldier saying that he's in good hands, and because he's being tended to by 2 lovely nurses. This is a linen card. There's a little poem printed on the back. It says, "My temperature's abnormal. My pulse is better too. I guess I'm in good hands right now, but gee, I sure miss you." Well, you can see that he's really missing somebody really badly there. I'm going to read a little bit of the message here. It's from Wilbur, saying, "I'm having a good time here, but I'm leaving tomorrow. Hope to hear from you soon. I will be okay, and don't you worry. Things are not as bad as they seem." Now, isn't that nice? Things are not as bad as they seem. Will write as soon as I can. Love, Wilbur. So, I don't know. Is this card sexist in our day, where we say, "Whoa, wait a minute, hang on here"? I don't know. Back in that day, and this was sent in 1942. It looks like, so early in the war. You know, he's having a good time. I don't know whether we would object to a card like this now. Maybe, maybe not. Any opinion? You consider this card sexist?
One of the things that's interesting, the illustration, if you remember the Betty Boop
Yes.
There's a similarity to me. I don't know it's the same artist, but there's a similarity in the figure drawing in comparison with the Betty Boop.
And what we might, in a later iteration, we might refer to as Barbie. There's kind of a Barbie look to them, to these young ladies. This is called au quartier. There's my French for you. It means in the quarter or in the neighborhood. This is a French stamp. And I don't know, let me get to the card here. These guys are obviously soldiers. And this guy is holding a rather lethal looking saber. It doesn't look like that. I don't see any firearms on them, but they may be hidden. Anyway, this was, let's see. This is written, it was posted, written in French. It just says au quartier. So that means in the neighborhood. It's not identified where. But I just think, this is another scene where these guys are obviously asked, can we take your picture? And they struck a pose and they were photographed. There's a certain kind of ease and casualness to it that, I find quite appealing. So here is harvesting tobacco in Kentucky. Children are in the field. Don't know if they were actually working in the field or if they were just in the picture. I believe that all these people, it looks like they're all white. These people, it looks like the people who are better dressed are in the front. These guys back here look like they are less well dressed, and maybe that's why they were asked to stand in the back. I think there was an attempt to sort of glamorize, if that's the word, working in the field. I mean, people are obviously posing here, but this must have been horrible backbreaking work. And there will be some other examples of people working in the field. This was published in Louisville, Kentucky. And it says harvesting tobacco in Kentucky. So, here they are posing. It's probably really hot and it's probably really hard work. Yet, many of the women and girls look like they were, not really dressed for working in the fields. These guys back here look like they are dressed for working in the fields. But look how this woman, they all look like they could be going to church. I don't know. So I don't know what the actual, how authentic a scene this actually is. We don't know. Marble Quarry in Lee, Massachusetts. You can barely see some workers way down here. There's something fascinating to me about quarries, and in particular marble quarries, because the stone is so heavy and so unforgiving that I don't know. It's got to be very difficult work, dangerous work, I would think. These stones are incredibly large and heavy. I'm sure they have to be handled very, very carefully. And there were probably lots of injuries and deaths associated with quarry work. But there's really no indication of that here. You barely see any people. And there's just something kind of visually lovely about it. So anyway, I have some other nice pictures of quarries. There's something very photographic about this stone in sunlight. There's something rather nice about it. All right, getting back to service, here are some guys in the Times Square Service Men's Center, Broadway at 47th Street, New York City. This center, I believe, was funded by Pepsi Cola. And there it is. Looks like pretty much the same logo. There it is, Pepsi Cola. And you can even see the clock. It says it's 13 minutes after 1. So, and these guys, and it looks like it is all guys, are kind of lounging in this Service Men's Center and drinking Pepsi. Again, this is obviously posed, but there it is. It's part of, you know, life in the military.
John, Ira, on that photograph of the Pepsi,
Yes,
if that's World War II,
yes.
would the camera equipment have changed enough by that point where
Yeah.
there wouldn't have had to be the same strictures regarding not moving in the way it would have been in some of your earlier cards?
To a certain extent. By World War II, the camera equipment was still 4x5-inch negatives. However, the cameras were more portable. They could have been handheld. They were still fairly slow working. This was before 35 millimeter, which didn't really come in till the, sometime during the 50s. Surprisingly enough, by the way, during the Kennedy administration, which some of us can remember, they were in the early days of the Kennedy administration, they were still using 4x5 cameras. And by the end of the short Kennedy administration, 1963, they were using 35. I say they, I mean, that's a generalization. But so in 1940s, they would have been using 4x5, probably handheld 4x5 cameras. So a little bit more portable than it was before, but still bulky and slow working by our standards.
Yeah, but this picture actually may be a painting. I have the feeling it's a painting rather than a photograph.
Oh, I'm sure it was based on a photograph. It may have been.
No, well, it may be based on photograph, but it's just so heavily manipulated. It really could be in its first stage and second stage is a painting.
Oh, well, it had not occurred to me. Perhaps I don't know. I mean, there's no question that it was based on a photograph. Whether it was actually somebody took a photographic print, and either made a painting derived from it, or actually hand colored a black and white print, that could easily have happened. Here we go to, this says marchand de comestibles, which means seller of consumables or food, I guess. This is printed in Cairo. So these people are Egyptian food sellers. It doesn't specify what kind of food, and it's not all that clear from the picture what it is. But it's just a sort of an exotic scene, if I can use that word. And obviously a very statically posed. And one of the relatively few work scenes that I have from, Africa. The card is printed in Egypt and sent to Baltimore, Maryland. So it was mailed and written, and there is Arabic printed on the card, as well as French. All right, planting sugarcane. Now here's another one of those, backbreaking jobs. hot and difficult and certainly low-paying jobs that these people are doing. Let's see if I can find the card. These people do appear to be Black. There is some kind of factory here in the distance. So I've got my arrow again. Some kind of factory here in the distance, which is probably used for processing the sugarcane. This is one of the cards published by Raphael Tuck. Those of you who are deeply into postcard collecting know that the Tuck cards are highly coveted. He was the, this is from the Under Southern Skies series. You know, that sounds rather pleasant, doesn't it? Under Southern Skies. But you know that these people were really working very hard, and this was very unpleasant. And then there's a little blurb printed on the back. In the southern U.S., the planting of sugarcane is planted every other year, average growing being 6 months. Little blurb about the actual planting of sugarcane. Anyway, this is a Tuck card, divided back, unposted. All right, this one is shipping celery, Sanford, Florida.
That previous one about sugarcane, there's at least one website which says it's either from Haiti or from New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
Quite interesting. So obviously they're hedging their bets.
Okay.
Just thought I'd mention.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. This card is shipping celery, Sanford, Florida, unposted, divided back. This is a refrigerated rail car. I don't know what these smokestacks are. Well, I'm not sure what they are, but perhaps that's part of the processing of the celery. I really don't know. But these are horse-drawn wagons, and they are loading them onto rail cars. No indication of the date on this, or actually where it has been printed. I believe Sanford, Florida was the place where many people eventually migrated to Rochester from. A little bit here and miss here. Okay, the Union Stockyards in Chicago. My father grew up in Chicago. And he said whenever you were near the stockyards, the smell was just overpowering. And it was huge, hundreds of acres devoted to basically slaughtering livestock. There is a blurb on the back here that tells you a little bit about it. It talks about an average of 1,000 cars of livestock is received daily, and about 500 cars of meat and other products leave daily for all parts of the world. $1 million worth of livestock is brought here every day of the year. And that's when $1 million was a lot of money. This was printed in Chicago, divided back, unposted. Yeah, Chicago Stockyards. Not a place to be if you are a vegan. First hoeing of cotton, Fort Worth, Texas, 1908. You know, kids, black kids, hoeing cotton. You know, in the early years of the 20th century. Were they being paid? Probably, but probably not very much. And how come these, how come they were not in school? This is an undivided back card sent in 1908 from Fort Worth, Texas to Hardy, Nebraska. This card, the image is not very sharp, just was printed that way. Unloading bananas in Mobile, Alabama. Big port city down south. Let's see if this card, this was, yeah, it was sent from Mobile to Buffalo, divided back card. It's written by a fellow named Will, and he said, "It is so hot that I have shed my vest." So you know that must have been hot. All right, this is John Philip Sousa, the famous band leader and composer of American march music. That is obviously him in the white suit. This is this location is Willow Grove Park. I don't know that that is identified any more than that, but it says that audiences numbering 15,000 persons will often congregate in or near the music pavilion. So this band drew a lot of people. And of course, he is world famous. John Philip Sousa, to this day, he's very, very well known, the Sousa March. It's sort of the quintessential American march music. Interesting to see that there is a harp here. We don't normally think of harp being suited to playing march music, but there it is. Tubas, clarinet. This might be a flute. Anyway, John Philip Sousa and his band. This is a divided back card, unposted. All kinds of languages on the back. English, French, it looks like German, Russian. Wow. Other languages that I really don't even recognize. You know, printed right on the card.
Ira, that Sousa band card is gorgeous.
Oh, well, I'm glad you like it.
God.
Interesting that the way this star is hung, it looks upside down, doesn't it? Wouldn't we normally expect the point to be at the top?
True. God.
Of course, this would give it greater stability if the wind were blowing in any breeze.
True,
Just
it would be
single
anchored at 2 points at the top. Very true. Very true.
Right.
Anyway, I'm glad you like that card. This is a lovely one, Rural Life, the Sower. I believe the life here is being led in Ireland. Let me try to catch up with where we are. But while I'm doing that, you can just appreciate how lovely this scene really is. This is also a Tuck card, Rural Life, Series 1421, published art publishers to their majesties, the King and Queen. And so it doesn't say where this rural scene is. It perhaps is it's definitely in the United Kingdom. Whether it's in England or Wales or Scotland, does not say. But it is lovely. This is definitely hand colored, and just a beautiful little interaction between these two rural people in the farm.
Ira, what was the number?
The number is 1421, series 1421.
Oh, great, thank you.
And it's called Rural Life, and it's published by Raphael Tuck and Sons.
Yeah, there's you know about their website. If you put in Tuck DB, it's their database, and you can look at all of the Tuck cards.
Really, I was not aware of it. Yeah, his stuff is really nice.
Wow.
Now, this is a milkmaid from Scotland, I believe. Also, oh no, I'm sorry, not a Tuck card. Oh, it is a Tuck card. It is a Tuck card. Photochrome Series 4491, a Scottish farm scene. Unposted, divided back card. A Scottish milkmaid. Quite lovely, this arch, just beautiful. And the scene beyond, and the cow. It's just beautiful.
Ira,
Yes.
in this particular card here, might this be taken from like an artistic scene or something like that, an adaptation? Because the reason I'm wondering is the pose of the cow with the eyes and the mouth and that.
Yes.
There just seems more of an artistic element than a composition than a photographic one. And I'm wondering what you would think about that.
I would just think that this photographer was working, very sort of slowly and deliberately, and waited until the woman and the cow were in a particular position. Maybe something was done to attract the attention of the cow. It does look like she is looking very intently at something or someone. Well, something might have been done to draw her attention to the camera. But of course, I'm just speculating. But I think my sense is that the photographer had something in mind that he or she, of course, it would have been a he, I dare say, had in mind. And they just decided that they were going to try to set this up. And so they positioned the woman and the cow in such a way, obviously, in this beautiful archway with that lovely, hillside scene behind them. And they, would have shot a black and white picture, and then the color would have been added. Now, this is called a Photochrome Series 4491. So the color was probably added in the lithography process. Frequently, these cards were sent to Germany to be printed, and that's where the color was added. I know very little about that process. But yeah, it's just a very beautiful composition, and just beautifully done. This is a war scene, a French battery, a mortar. This is a mortar, a French mortar crew, 28 centimeter mortars in action near Newport. That may be in France or Belgium, but one has to believe that this is an actual war scene, World War I. Now, what kind of camera would have been used in a war scene? Again, in World War I, this would have been a 4x5 or larger camera. It might have been a 5x7 or an 8x10. They were certainly not, it wouldn't have been anything smaller. So, they were taking these big cameras into the war zone. This is vendeur d'eau, water sellers. These guys were selling water in Cairo. I have a very small collection from Asia and Africa, Middle East, but I'd like to increase. I'm still buying cards. It's a bit of an obsession, as I'm sure you know what that's like. But this was mailed from Egypt to London, and it's an undivided card with Arabic, French. There's Arabic and French on the back, and these guys are selling water. Well, I didn't get a chance to show the ones that I mentioned from Fall River, Massachusetts, the cotton mill. But anyway, I guess that is my show. I think we are probably out of time. Does anybody have any questions? I'll be happy to take compliments and complaints you can give to Michael.
Okay, but there would be no complaints. It was very good.
Thank you. Sorry that we had a little glitch there in terms of the advancing the slides, but such is life in the tech lane.
Ira, it's
Anyway.
lovely.
Questions? Anybody have any questions?
Just to comment that it's lovely. I love these genre scenes. They're wonderful.
Yeah, and the colors are beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I have a question. Was that a flying machine in your very first postcard? I assume that was actually built and trialed.
It was actually built, yes, and built and failed, and built and failed. It apparently never got off the ground. The guy was kind of relentless about it, and he kept trying and kept failing. So I don't know. That was his claim to fame, and his claim to fame basically is that the machine never got off the ground. It just didn't work. He evidently liked the design of a Ferris wheel, but a Ferris wheel and an airplane are two different things. So,
Ira,
yes.
in your collection, from a photographic point of view, do you see an evolution in terms of the composition of the photographs that became the basis of the card? So they try, in other words, they try to go from less posing and more trying to capture whether it more unposed situation.
Yeah.
Do you see that in your?
Yeah. Yes, I do. When these people were using very, heavy, bulky, non-portable cameras, they would here's what they would do. Let's use this Egyptian scene. The photographer saw this rather nice background and might have said to these guys, maybe he had a translator, he didn't speak Arabic. Let's do a picture here of you selling water. This is a beautiful scene. I'd like to include you in it, and let's please set this up. And or who knows, they may have just been there spontaneously. But it was such, the camera was so big and bulky that he would have had to have their at least consent and cooperation to do this kind of shot, because there's no way that this would have been a candid. So yes, the type of camera throughout history definitely affected the types of images that were produced, no question about it. And when the 35 came along, then that was a very portable camera that came along. Well, in some cases, it was very, a few people were able to start using 35s, I think in the 1930s and 40s, but it didn't really become available to the general public until the 50s after the war. And then it just took off. The 35 millimeter camera became the standard camera.
Because Leica came out with 35 millimeters in the 30s.
Yes.
And Kodak did make several black and white films.
Yes.
For 35. In fact, the George Eastman House here in Rochester, which is one of the largest collection of photographs in the world,
Right.
have the negative and print collection of Eric Solomon, who was Hitler's personal
Mhm.
photographer.
Yeah.
And some of those are, believe it or not, extremely funny and bizarre. But I think the camera, I think the Leica 1 came out maybe in the mid 30s.
Mhm. Yeah, well, the Henri Cartier-Bresson was a Frenchman who used the Leica. He photographed, well, in many, many countries, but especially in his native France. And he was one of the masters, early masters of 35 millimeter photography.
Robert Capra, who did those famous photographs of the D-Day landing when he was in one of the barges. And they're all kind of blurry, but you see the horrors of the initial landing in these photographs.
Mhm. Mhm. And Robert Frank was also a master of 35 millimeter street photography.
Yes.
In fact, you're probably familiar with a book that he published called The Americans. He himself was Swiss, Robert Frank, but he came to the US and died not too long ago. And he did an amazing book called The Americans, using his Leica in the streets of America.
Changed photography.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He also became a filmmaker later in life, but he's best known for his 35 millimeter still photos. Any other questions or comments?
That one of the food sellers in Cairo, that looks like flatbread.
Oh, yes, it does, now that you mentioned it. Yes.
Maybe they're putting some sort of stuff on top, like a hummus or something.
Could be, could be. When I visited Israel many, many decades ago as a, I don't know, 13 years old maybe.
These are all magnificent cards. And that one of the two black children hoeing is tragic. And
well, you know, when you think about it, it's easy to look at a postcard and say, oh, yeah, I mean, this is, it. But when you think about it, you know, these kids were working, they were being worked mercilessly. And it is tragic, you know, that these kids had to work so hard. Why weren't they in school? Well, they had to work. Well, why? You know, there's a whole backstory there, which we can't really get into now, I suppose. But yeah, you know, child labor. Why are these kids working in the fields?
I think of the Louis Hine photographs.
Yes.
Of child labor when I look at those.
Exactly. And his photographs were responsible for getting some child labor laws passed. His work was very effective at influencing public policy.
That's right.
Yeah, he was a master of that. Any other questions?
I have a more general question, if that's appropriate.
Sure. Hello, Douglas. You're still in the Oval Office. Good for you.
Well, I'm being challenged on that. No, I have a number of local historical scenes on RPPCs, the real photo postcards. And my intention has always been to make enlargements of them. And since these are not dot matrix printed images, but rather each postcard was a photographic print, I wonder if any of the club members have had experience with enlarging these. And how large is it? How many times magnification is it possible to obtain without distortion? You won't have pixelation, but without distortion, they'll still be sharp. How large could I make these?
Anybody in the club want to field that?
Again, that would depend on the quality of the card too, wouldn't it? I mean, how well it was initially printed. The registration.
They all look pretty good.
And if the image was in registration.
Yes, these all look pretty good. Some of them were made by Fred Locke, the porcelain insulator inventor, who had very much a strong hobby of photographing. So you know, they're pretty sharp with a good camera.
Yeah, if the original is good quality and the copy person knows what they're doing, then there's every reason to think you could get a really good quality copy and then make a large print. Do you have a print size in mind?
Yes, maybe as large as 40, 50 inches wide, 30 inches high. And it show a great detail, a lot of great detail if it's still sharp.
Yeah.
Another issue confronting not so long ago, this could be a photographic print, maybe like the way Polaroid did the pinhole camera rooms. But I guess now primarily the approach would be a good digital photograph, high resolution digital. And I'm not sure just how that will work out enlarging.
Mm-hmm. Again, if your original is good and your copy technique is good, you are going to be in good shape.
And Eastman Kodak, which we know is no longer available, did make extremely fine grained, slow films.
Yes.
Designed for copy work.
Yes.
But that's all history now. But I mean,
Right.
It was super, super fine grained film.
Yeah. Well, you can get the same general effect with a digital camera. You just set it to a low ISO, and that is the equivalent of using a slow, fine-grained film. And make sure you're using a tripod and that the original is well lit. And, you're just using good camera technique and it should be fine.
Now, when the paintings were stolen from the George Eastman house, as it was called then, and then recovered, copies were made by Polaroid, not by Kodak, using this pinhole camera approach. And I think that was purely optical. It was not digital. And is that sort of approach still done? Does Polaroid still do that?
I don't know. I don't really know it. I think Polaroid is still in existence.
Yes.
But what they actually are offering, I would not be able to tell you.
I don't think they make films anymore. There's a photographer here in Rochester, Carl Carenza.
I know Carl.
Products.
Yes.
I think he's got it stockpiled.
Yeah.
But I think I think Kodak or Polaroid films now are a thing of the past.
Oh,
Well, they do. They actually have some cameras that are popular with kids, I think now.
Yes, there are little sort of toy instant
Yeah.
cameras that are made by Polaroid, and I think Fuji. I think there are other manufacturers that make them too.
But I think Polaroid's sheet film in large format film is
Mhm.
they don't make it. They might make novelty cameras and camera for kids.
By the way, Carl has a show up at the Eastman Museum now. Rick, if you haven't seen it yet, it's well worth seeing.
Oh yes, yeah, it is quite a show.
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ira. Thank you. It was very-
Well, my
Thank you.
pleasure. It's been very nice to meet you guys and gals, and keep up your deltiology. It's kind of hard to kick the habit, not that one would need to, but eBay, it's just so easy to buy stuff on eBay these days that it's kind of hard not to.
But we'd
Oh,
love
anyway.
to have you in the club.
It is.
Well, I would happy to do that, and I guess I'll have to talk to the president about that.
I'll send you an email.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you,
very
everybody.
much.
Thank you for attending my lecture.
Thank you. And then just a reminder for everybody that next month, our meeting will be on Tuesday, July 6th, with Michael Langenstein, who's, as I said earlier in the beginning, he's an American artist, creates postcard collages. He's had a number of his works have been published, and he's going to talk to us about that. It should be very, very good. He's in Manhattan. And I think he's on our meeting tonight, and he'll be our presenter next month.
Very good.
So thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you again, Ira.
Thank you.
very much.
Have a
My
good night.
pleasure. My pleasure. Have a good night.